Hey guys, Chris Adams here with RVA Returners, back for the next episode in our Deck Tech series that we're doing to lead up to the Water Crystal Cup in Portland this weekend coming up. Now, like Adam before me, I'm going to say that if I were going to this event, the deck I would be playing would be Mono Wind. But we had Adam Duncan in the last group of these kind of cover Mono Wind two different ways. Though my build's different, we just didn't want to do the same deck again for the third time in a month. So the deck I'm actually going to be doing today is one that I would still feel very comfortable playing. It is a deck that does require a little more reps, so it would need a little more prep time, but it's one that I've played at other events in the past and have done well with it. And it was kind of a major player coming down the home stretch of Opus 7. You saw a lot of it here in events on the East Coast. And that deck I'm talking about is Earth, Water, Carbuncle. All right, now taking a look at the list, you'll see a breakdown we have here. We have 24 forwards, we have 9 summons, and we have 17 backups. All right, so before we start breaking down the deck, let's kind of talk about the major pieces of the deck. And of course, it's primarily built around the 2 cards, Carbuncle and Graviton. Ideally, what's happening in this deck is you are casting Carbuncle on any of your lower power forwards, allowing Graviton to trigger to actually let these 2 CP forwards, these 4 CP 5K forwards, really trade up the curve and make combat favorable in any given situation. Looking at the forwards, you're going to notice outside of Cecil, all of the forwards are either a base 7,000 power or less. Now the reason that's important is that's the sweet spot you want them to be in when you start looking at stacking these Graviton Carbuncle triggers and casts. Because ideally all of your forwards are going to be able to engage in combat with whoever you want them to. It doesn't matter what your opponent's going to have on the board. Everything that you have is going to be able to get through them, over them, however you want to slice it. And every forward brings something different to the deck. Obviously, a card like Puge, you're using him to search out Wrastler, which will kind of help clean up your backup line, which will also improve Ash. Or you're using him to search Noctis. Ico there to get some of your summons out. Like if you really need to get a Carbuncle, if you're searching for the 1 copy of Medine, which plays very well with Garnet, turning that into a one-sided board wipe. Psycom Enforcer there to deal with any troublesome monsters, any Layax, Cactuars, things like that. Zidane is there as early card advantage. He's still a card that, while he is a small, fragile body, in a Carbuncle deck, you can get a couple casts on him, he's still going to be coming across and trading with something at the least if they don't deal with him early. And if he does start hitting you and you start generating that card advantage, you're probably not going to lose. Rosa, just a great way to get a Cecil out of your deck, and she does kind of fit that mold of being just right there in that sweet spot as a 4 CP 5K. Porum there for filtering. So every forward does serve a purpose, and not just from the text on their card, their power being a very, very key component to their inclusion in the deck. The 2 forwards I really want to kind of highlight here are Moogle Knight and Noctis. Noctis, we already know what that card can do in a deck where you can constantly raise his power. He allows you to really make your opponent think twice when they attack you, because if you're able to cast a Carbuncle on him, he can now fight something at 9k power. If you have a Cockatrice with Graviton out, you'll be able to do 9k to something off that trigger and not have to worry about dying. It just really opens up the opportunities that you have when you start taking damage. Another forward in the deck, one of the best additions I feel, is Moogle Knight. The fact that it has Brave, it's right there in that sweet spot being a 3 CP 5K. The fact that combat damage dealt to it, or damage dealt by a forward, is reduced by 3k really makes him great for offensive pressure, being that he has Brave. And then when you start doing Carbuncle tricks on him, when he's back on defense, your opponent now has to play through that. Meaning they're going to have to waste spot removal or summons on him, which could be tough, especially when you have Garnet on the field, which is now Moogle Knight. Not only is his combat damage from forwards reduced by 3,000, which is any damage dealt by forward reduced by 3,000, but now summon damage is reduced by 5,000 with Garnet out. So this card kind of becomes a really tough one to get around for your opponent. Looking at the summons, we got a very simple package here. We're looking at 3 copies of Carbuncle. That's the namesake of the deck. this is the card you want to get in your hand. You want to be able to use something like Ico or just draw into this, get it into your hand so you can start maximizing all of your combat tricks. Especially once you have Graviton out and you've got Carbuncle in hand, it's going to really be hard for your opponent to start pushing through, and they're really going to have to find ways and get creative to get those Carbuncles out of your hand, kind of force you to waste them in situations where you don't really want to. We're just also looking at 3 copies of Hecaton Chair. Obviously, this is some of the best spot removal that Earth has, especially once you start looking at Carbuncle uses and Graviton triggers. It really makes any forward that you have a threat to Hecaton Chair anything on their side of the board. Cockatrice can just definitely close out a game. It's a great way to protect any of the forwards that you have from damage. Really great with Noctis when he starts battling things with his fight trigger. The last summon we're looking at here, 1 copy of Medine. In the earlier builds of the deck, you would see more of like a Camlanot, Gabranth, Zodiark package where Medine with Garnet is almost serving the same purpose, but with Garnet's reduction and with some of the backups that we're using, this turns it into a one-sided board wipe. So once you're looking to close out the game, you can just play the Medine, wipe your opponent's board, and just swing through with your forwards for the win. Lastly, let's go ahead and take a look at this backup line. Every backup in the deck does serve a purpose. We'll just kind of work our way down the line, starting with Leo. Obviously, he's there just as some sort of deterrent for your opponent's summons. Being able to catch 4 CP or less does catch a lot of removal or any sort of summons your opponent may look to play. Famfrits, Cyclopses, Titans, Hecaton Chairs, your opponent's own Carbuncle if you find yourself in that mirror. Your opponent having to play around that if you leave that up on any given turn really forces them into some awkward plays. Wrestler, that's a backup that makes Ash extremely hard to deal with for a lot of decks, especially once you're at the point where you've taken just straight up spot removal, break removal off the table for her, and using burn summons or any summon that deals direct damage or abilities that do damage make it really, really difficult to get her off the board as it is. Scholar's there to get your Hecaton Chairs back, your Gravitons back in the event of a timely Zidane, or you're up against a Sephiroth or any sort of aggressive ice discard. Being able to get those back is going to be absolutely important. Brawn is there to get your Moogle Knights out of your deck. Maybe get the Psycom Enforcer if you're up in dealing with monsters or in a matchup that's pretty monster heavy. Graviton, obviously the backbone of the deck. This thing is a 3-up. Being able to have this out with Carbuncles in hand, the deck will be firing on all cylinders at that point. Minwu is probably the second most important backup in the deck, especially when you start using Moogle Knight to block various forwards, or you're using Noctis to fight various things. Hecaton Chairs, being able to stop anything that isn't lethal on your forwards is pretty huge in this deck, especially when you have these smaller forwards that are blocking and you're increasing their power with Graviton and Carbuncle, and then they can do it again without fear of you losing that forward. We all know how Minwu works at this point. Miner's there to recover some of your smaller backups, your Lails, your Scholars. If they destroy your Wrestler, you can get that back, and it's a great way to recover your forwards throughout the course of the game, getting Cecil's back for Dark, getting Ash's back for her special, getting Noctis's, Moogle Knights, you name it, you probably want it back on the board. Star Sibyl's there to search out Puge. You can search out Graviton with it. You can search out Shantoto, which is just there in the event that you may just need to reset the board. Minfilia is there as well, just to, again, recycle 2 cards. It's a great way to deal with, your Yuris that are still a threat, any sort of Gaudises, any light or dark cards you need to get off the board. And that is Earth, Water, Carbuncle. Guys, I appreciate you watching. Give us your thoughts down below. Let us know what you would play if you were going to Portland. And let us know if you have a Carbuncle deck. Like I said, the deck has been around since Opus 5. So if there's anything you would do different, any deck choices, please sound off in the comments below. And again, as always, thanks for watching.